I call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak in opposition to this bill. Before I move on to the substance of the flaws of this bill, I'd just like to acknowledge the Honourable Phil Goff. He has a reputation of an extremely diligent and hard-working member, a very capable senior minister under the previous Labor government. Mr. Goff, this is not your finest work. Before I move on, sir, to the flaws and the tests that this bill would apply, I shudder. There's quite a chilling effect that has come with news in the recent week or so. There are some provisions in the bill as it stands in this first reading as to how those it would be applicable to would be determined. But just in this last week, the House has very good cause to consider that if this bill were to progress to select committee stage and beyond, that the true test of applicability would actually be based on the sound of people's names. And that's an absolute disgrace, sir. Absolutely terrible to stand in this House this week after such postulation was made over the last 10 days, and the spokesperson for ethnic communities in the Labor Party was quite equivocal in his not even quite condemnation of what his colleagues had done, sir. So it's quite chilling effect that we could possibly look to change the applicability to the basis of what a name sounds like. But let us, sir, first actually then now move on to the provisions of the tests of this bill and how flawed they are. Because as the speakers on both sides have pointed out, the test for a foreign investor wanting to buy land of 5 hectares or greater, rural land, under this bill would be what a hypothetical New Zealander might do in the future. How on earth can you run a robust test on, particularly for people who say they support foreign direct investment, on the basis of what someone who doesn't exist and isn't in the market at that time, on what they might possibly do? Anyone could make up what someone might possibly do if that person in fact isn't in the market at the time and bidding for that sale. The only test that can be logically applied outside of fundamental objective criteria, such as the IIA does today, which is will it create more economic benefit, will it create more jobs, is to test against other participants in the marketplace. This bill creates a test against a hypothetical bidder, someone that doesn't exist, and is open to just pure subjective decision-making at any point in time. It is poorly drafted, Mr. Speaker. It simply wouldn't really work. But it's quite rich that this change is being suggested from a member of the previous Labor government. I'd like to remind the House that in the previous Labor government sold the equivalent of the whole 16 Crayfar farms every month for the whole 9 long years of the tenure of their government. And Mr. Goff, the sponsor of this bill, was a senior cabinet minister in that government. What we have, sir, and another reason this bill is simply unnecessary, we have a current Overseas Investment Act. We have provisions for testing the value of an overseas bid to buy farmland in this country. It's an economic test. Will it create economic benefit? Will it create jobs or protect jobs? Because there's a real possibility, particularly when you look at receivership circumstances, perhaps such as the likes of the Crayfar farms, that in fact keeping the farm going as a working concern is every bit actually as good as any other test, because otherwise jobs would be lost. And let's look at how we operate this balance and how we are placed across other countries we would compare ourselves with in the OECD. We have a very restrictive regime. The OECD rates New Zealand as the 6th most restrictive nation for investment in land in the OECD, the sixth. So it's interesting to see that they think we've got a problem that needs to be addressed. We are the 6th most restrictive today under a set of objective criteria. The sixth most restrictive. Just to remind ourselves that if we were to adopt a bill such as this, you get investments like Hire, or particularly in land, Mutlang, James Cameron, that would be rejected. Julian Robertson, all would be rejected. Mr Speaker, the bill wouldn't achieve what it would want to achieve in terms of an objective measure. It is a flawed idea. It is a flawed bill. I oppose it.
I call James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.